Hello, and welcome to my new nightly obsession, the Massacre franchise, which has gone beyond unhealthy and right into the realm of unhinged. The Massacre franchise is a lesser-known horror movie franchise which includes the Slumber Party Massacre trilogy and the remake, the Sorority House Massacre trilogy, and the Cheerleader Massacre duology? It's quite a few films that sort of are related to each other, but also kind of aren't. It gets confusing. I feel like retroactively I need to apologize to the Halloween franchise because I've said that was confusing. I was wrong. I didn't know what confusing was. And until I found this maze. So I am here in, well, I don't actually own pajamas, but I do have some scandalous lacy red underwear, which I think makes me absolutely prepared to have a slasher slumber party. So let's get into this nonsense. But I need some backstory. Okay. So the Black Christmas came out in 1974 and it involved a crazy killer who we presume is named Billy on the loose, and he kills a bunch of women who live in a sorority together. And since then, there have actually been a lot of horror movies that take place in sororities, but I feel like there's some films we kind of associate that with more, such as The Black Christmas, there's been 3 of them, To All a Good Night, Initiation, Night of the Creeps, Sorority Babes, and the Slime Ball Bolorama, and its sequel, totally would recommend it. It has Linnea Quigley. The House on Sorority Row, Final Exam, Dorm That Dripped Blood, Splatter University, Graduation Day. I'm just quoting Randy from Scream 2 at this point. Hell Night, Killer Party, Silent Madness, Sorority Row, Spring Break Massacre, and then we get to the franchise, which I will be talking about now. Slumber Party Massacre came out in 1982, and it is, oh my god, it is very important not only to horror movies, but also to just movie history in general. The 3 films in the Slumber Party proper trilogy, being Slumber Party 1, 2, 3, were all directed and written by women. As far as I can find, and I've looked, I can only think of in total 4 trilogies that were directed in their entirety by women, which would be the Slumber Party Massacre, the Bridget Jones, Diary, Edge of Reason, and Baby. The Fear Street trilogy, which is a horror anthology that Netflix put out, which is the only trilogy I can find that was made completely by one woman on her own. And then lastly would be the Matrix. Well, now there's 4 of them, but the OG trilogy was directed by 2 women, Lana and Lily Wachowski. But if we're being honest with ourselves, had the studios, I think it was Warner Brothers, had Warner Brothers been aware they were hiring 2 women in 1999 to make The Matrix, I doubt we would have ever gotten The Matrix. At least not at that budget. Certainly not a trilogy. But either way, those are the only trilogies I can find that have been in their entirety directed by women, which is kind of unfortunate. It is very rare that women make more than one movie. And generally speaking, when they do, it's in indie films. And that is why these films got made. They are Roger Corman. All these movies are Roger Corman productions. If you're not unfamiliar with Roger Corman, he's very famous in the world of film. Mainly, I mean, like, he goes way back to like the Hays Code days and like the studio system. Like, this man's like 90 and he's been making movies since he was, for 7 decades. But he's most famous for having given a lot of very famous people kind of their early jobs, like Jack Nicholson, Martin Scorsese, Joe Dante, James Cameron, like huge names got their start in Corman. It's kind of known as like the Corman School. If you really love a director, I guarantee they are in some way, shape, or form influenced by Corman, whether it got an early job there or influenced by a filmmaker that he got started. It's 6 degrees from Kevin Bacon, but I guarantee it's 2 degrees from Corman. Like, the dude made so many movies, and insane. But generally speaking, he would start people off in editing. And once you had edited, a number of films for Roger, you would be allowed to ask to direct a film. And that is exactly how the director of Slumber Party Massacre, which came out in 1982, Amy Holden Jones, was able to direct Slumber Party Massacre. It was written by Rita Mae Brown, and if you are not a sapphic deity such as myself, you may not be aware of her, but she wrote a book, Ruby Fruit Jungle, which is mandatory lesbianic reading. And she actually wrote the script to be a parody of slashers. So as early as 1982, we could have had essentially Scream, which is so awesome. But Roger wanted a straight slasher, so they revamped the script to make it just a plain, normal slasher. But Amy Holden Jones did keep some of the kind of campy jokiness to Rita Mae Brown's original script, which I deeply enjoy. This film does very much come off as being very similar to Halloween and Black Christmas, which had come out, a few years before. Honestly, Slumber Party Massacre is a fine movie. I like its sequel so much more, but to explain, the plot is there. It's a slumber party and some girls get massacred. Normally I would show a poster, but there's 4 women in their underwear. These 4 women are not in the movie, by the way. Then there's a man standing with his legs open with a very large drill bit. Wink, wink. It's a phallic symbol. And staring down at them. And if you watch enough horror movies, this poster is copied in so many horror films. It's kind of funny. It's not even the best one. I do think it's important to note that Robin Still and Brinke Stevens are 2 of the actresses in this film, and they also go on to be in Sorority Babes in the Slimeball Bowl-O-Rama. Did I mention you should watch that movie? Because if you can, you should. And then Brinke Stevens, it's important to note, plays a character, Linda Dawn Grant, who will be in subsequent sequels. And it gets confusing. Anyway, so the plot of the movie, girl Trish is an 18-year-old senior in high school. Her parents are out of town, so she invites her friends Kim, Jackie, Diane, and then 2 of their boyfriends, Neil and Jeff, over to have a party, but the parents are gone. The driller killer, aka Russ Thorne, has escaped. I don't know if it was from prison or a hospital, but he's a murderer who's escaped from somewhere, and he chases after the girls to kill them. Pretty cut and dry. Across the street, there's another girl, Valerie, babysitting her younger sister, Courtney. They do end up coming over and finding some bodies. Bunch of people die. Even the poor pizza man. Poor pizza man. Russ Thorne is really creepy. At the end, when he's confronting kind of the last of the couple survivors, he says, "You're pretty. All of you are very pretty. I love you. It takes a lot of love for a person to do this. You know you want it. You'll like it. Yes." Very chilling, obviously, sexual in nature. At the end, I believe it's Valerie takes a very long, I think machete, and cuts the drill bit in half. It's an analogy for castration. And then Valerie and Trish, mostly Valerie, kill Russ and survive. Ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba. Yeah, so it's, girls running around in their underwear. What I really like about this film, though, is that the girls are really smart, and they arm themselves while the dumb boys, leave to try to go get help and get immediately murdered because they split from the group. And while the girls stick together and fight to survive, they don't. They're overpowered, but I like the camaraderie in that. And I also like that all of the boys in all these movies, they're always immediately shown first kind of as peeping Toms and as kind of intruders, even when they're invited. The masculinity is intruding into a feminine space. And I like how that's shown. And generally you don't see that in movies directed by men. Sometimes, but usually not. Not if it's supposed to be the boyfriend. Okay, moving on to Slumber Party Massacre 2, which came out 5 years later. It was directed and written by Deborah Brock. Still Corman produced. This film the only thing it has to do with the first movie is we have, in name only, one of the characters comes back. Courtney Bates comes back playing the same character, and she's now a high school senior, and she's gonna have a slumber party with her friends for her birthday. Oh dear, poor girl. The driller killer in this one is played by Anton Illich, who I think is the son of the dude who's the founder of Little Caesars, which is just a fun fact. And he is playing this character to perfection. Who is the driller killer this time? He rocks a red guitar with a giant drill, and he exists in Courtney's dreams and then comes into the real world like friggin' Freddy Krueger. Thematically, this film is very much about a young girl who's afraid to lose her virginity. It's about repressed trauma. I mean, she has a dream where her sister Valerie says, "Don't go all the way." The killer's, continuously talking about how much he loves her and interrupting her and her boyfriend from having sex and stuff like that. So yeah, so it ends up being very puritanical in its messaging. But also, poor Courtney. At the end of the movie, I don't know it's very open to interpretation. So you don't know if any of that really happened, if some of it happened, if none of it happened. Who knows? Not even the writer. Moving on to Slumber Party Massacre 3, which came out in 1990. That's important to note. It was directed by Sally Mattison and written by Catherine Searin. Oh, dear. Well, yeah, okay, so now we have a whole new group of friends who are having a slumber party. So this chick, Juliet, goes to take a shower, but before taking a shower, she turns on a vibrator, and then someone drops the plugged-in vibrator into her shower, electrocuting her. And then we're off to the murder races. Again, the girls huddle together. They arm themselves. They're still in their underwear. I don't understand it. If I was being stalked, I'd throw on a fucking shirt. But whatever. The boys split up, and then one of the boys is revealed to be the killer. And it gets really weird. Like, I don't know what this movie was doing. So it turns out Ken is the killer. And his police officer uncle, who recently took his own life, was sexually abusing him. So I guess he's like taking out his trauma on women in a very violent and sexually devious way. Like real life. But the movie gets like really weird. So at this one point, he attacks one of the girls, Susie. Now I've seen people getting attacked in movies, right? Like serial killers, like killing people, but this one is so much more devious. Like, he pushes this girl onto the bed, he starts punching her and like beating her and like grabbing her hands so she like can't fight back, and screaming at her and accusing her of killing Juliet, which, did he kill her or did he not kill her and that's what set him off? Like, I actually don't know. It's very confusing. And then he takes his drill, which is huge. It's like, and he starts to go up her skirt with it before, thankfully, he is stopped by some of the other girls. But and it kind of goes back and forth, like, who gets the upper hand? Him, the girls. Finally, they throw bleach on his face, which, like, blinds him. I don't know if that's how bleach works, but I'm going to go with it. But then he gets one of the girls, Maria, and it gets, like, very sexually devious. Like, it turns into a grape scene. It's very purple. Not liking it. It's going very raisin very quickly. Like, honestly, I think that scene went way too far. And reading kind of, like, the additional information, like, on IMDb, I'll just quote it. The rape and murder of the character Maria was a reshoot of that scene. The director, Sally Mattison, was vehemently against it. She felt that it was gratuitous and glorified the sexual abuse of women, something she wanted to avoid. She only included it because it was a direct order from producer Roger Corman. So that's something I really wanted to talk about with these films. I notice, like, a lot of people, like Joe Bob Briggs, for instance, definitely talks about this, as well as just, like, so many people who talk, especially about horror movies, are pretty much always straight white dudes. I'm going to emphasize dudes. You very rarely hear people in this space that aren't that talking about these types of things. So I did a whole video on the female gaze, so I won't rehash that too much, but I will say I get very annoyed when these men come out and say, oh, but look at these movies. They were directed by women and they still showed nude women. They still show assault scenes. Yeah, because they were produced by Roger Corman, who last time I checked is a dude. This is still the male gaze because men still have control over the final product of the film. Like if you look at another Roger produced film that was directed by a woman, Humanoid from the Deep, Corman actually hired a male director to come in and shoot the assault scenes and put them into the movie against the wishes of the female director, whose name omits me. I'll type it below. Yeah, so it's like you can't say these films are, yeah, they're directed by women, but the final product is Roger Corman. Full stop. They didn't have final say. When you have someone, a different director entirely coming in and adding a scene, or you're being forced to do a scene you don't want to do, and you say, I don't want to include this scene, like, this is not what the female gaze is. Sorry, if there is such a thing. This is very much still the male gaze. And I think it sucks, and it's problematic, and it's unnecessary. Very unnecessary. Yikes. Anyway, at the end of this film, Jackie kills Ken with his own drill. Pretty viciously. And we have 2 survivors, and that's nice. Okay, moving on to Sorority House Massacre, which was written and directed by Carol Frank and came out in 1986. It is also a Corman-produced feature. I will say, honestly, out of all of these movies, I think this is the best made film. And it's kind of interesting. It is a little reminiscent of, like, Nightmare on Elm Street. Even more so than Slumber Party Massacre 2. So basically in this film, we have a sorority, I think Theta Omega Theta, and it is spring break. Most of the house is gone except for 4 girls. Beth, our main character, Sarah, who is the brunette, Linda, who is on her way to becoming a, psychiatrist, and then Tracy, and then they have 4 boys who come to join them. John, Craig, Andy, and Steve. Craig is the only one we care about. Fuck all the others. So when Beth arrives at the sorority house, this is her first night there, a man, Robert, aka Bobby Henkel, who is institutionalized, becomes very agitated and starts to become verbal for the first time in 14 years. So clearly he has a connection to Beth. And they start having dreams about each other. Some sort of psychic link, perhaps. Honestly, it's just, there's a lot of, like, very ethereal dream sequences that are pretty dope. Really, like, I really, really like them. They're, I think, like, really creative and cool looking. Thematically, the film is about, like, dreams. It gets very psychoanalytic. Fuck Freud. There's a lot about clairvoyance and morality. And, there's a dude with a big knife. Phallic panic gone wrong, if you will. We learn through a series of stories that 14 years ago, a man, it's Bobby, killed his parents and 3 of his 4 younger sisters in the house that is now the sorority house. And Beth, it turns out, is the youngest of the sisters. The other sisters being Kathy, Janet, and Susan. So Bobby shows up. It takes a long time to walk up to the house. Like, they keep cutting back. That's like my only complaint about the movie. They keep cutting back to him walking towards the house. And it takes like 10 minutes for him to get to the house. I'm like, he's walking across a yard. What is happening? Why is this taking so long? So that was my only complaint about the movie. But he eventually starts killing people, and he sees the other girls in the house as like replacements for Kathy, Janet, and Susan, his other 3 sisters that he's killed. So he's kind of like reliving the event 14 years ago. There's some pretty brutal kills in the movie, but what I really liked is when this one girl's killed and her shirt gets ripped off as she's killed, the guy, Craig, runs away, and he is butt naked, which you really don't see in horror movies. If you're playing horror movie bingo, you should put a spot on there for fully nude woman next to fully dressed man. Like, could you imagine having sex and like one person is completely clothed and the other person is completely naked? Like, what are you even doing? What is happening? I just find that very weird. I did that. No, maybe I'm doing it wrong. Anyway, Craig and two of the other chicks start to defend themselves and try to hide from Bobby. Beth joins them after kind of fucking John over. She rolled over and like basically put him in the path of the knife to get away, which is messed up. I think it's Linda, Sarah, Beth, and Craig are like trying to escape. Craig gets killed. I love that Linda puts on a robe. Yes, girl. Thankfully. The police and one of the psychiatrists is out looking for Robert. At the end, Robert and Beth have a confrontation. Eventually, everyone is killed except for Beth. And again, I would just say like this is honestly a really good movie and would totally recommend it. And this concludes the movies that were directed by women. Now we're getting to the last three films in this franchise I'm going to talk about, which were all directed by the same man, Jim Wynorski, who you might know as the director of Chopping Mall. I really like that movie, by the way. He also directs a lot of like horror parody porn films. So Sorority House Massacre 2 came out in 1990, and it actually uses the exact same set as Sorority House Massacre 3 because they were filmed in the same year. In fact, Sorority House Massacre 3 was also filmed the same year, and that gets complicated. I'll get to it in a minute. So this is actually not a sequel to Sorority House Massacre 1, but it is a loose sequel to Slumber Party Massacre 1, in that they have flashbacks, and the flashbacks are all footage from Slumber Party Massacre 1. However, they use a different backstory over it. They're renaming the killer from Slumber Party Massacre 1, who in that film was Russ Thorne, to Hochstetter. And apparently in this film, 5 years ago, there was a slaughter in the house that these women have bought to be their new sorority house because they got it at a great deal because he wants to buy the murder house. They have a creepy neighbor by the name of Orville Ketchum, and apparently he stopped Hochstetter those 5 years ago, and now he's red herring. These half-nude women use a Ouija board and resurrect Hochstetter. My soul is dying. We have two police officers who are trying to like solve some crimes, I guess. I don't even know what's happening in this movie. In the end, the nude women are basically running around throughout the whole movie being really stupid. And then the big, strong man, Orville Ketchum, has to come and save them. What pisses me off, though, is that we have the flashbacks of Russell Thorne using his giant drill bit to kill the chicks in Slumber Party Massacre. But in this movie, Sorority House Massacre 2, he uses a hook, not a drill. How dare? How dare? I don't know what this has to do with Sorority House Massacre 1. I don't know what it has to do with Slumber Party Massacre 1. I don't know. I didn't like this one. Which brings us to Sorority House Massacre 3, aka Hard to Die, aka Tower of Terror, which was also released in 1990. Well, filmed in 1990. It was released on VHS in 1990, and it did have a limited theatrical run in 1992. It was directed by Jim Wynorski, still Corman production. It has a number of people from Sorority House Massacre 2, wherein one particular woman, Gail Harris, returns as Linda. And this time she's specifically called Linda Dawn Grant. Yes, Linda, the survivor, one of these survivors from Slumber Party Massacre number 1, has apparently been in Sorority House Massacre 2 and 3. But what's interesting about Sorority House Massacre 3 is that it is a remake of Sorority House Massacre 2, and it came out the same year and had the same people in it. What is the point? What? That's the most Roger Corman thing I've ever heard. So yeah, it has a lot of the same people. We have a return of Orville Ketchum, Candy, two of the police officers, and a couple of the women. And this time, basically, instead of being at a sorority house, they're in a high-rise building, and I think they're like lingerie models because they needed a reason to have them in their underwear. I'm not screaming inside. And then lastly, we come to Cheerleader Massacre, which was also directed by Jim Waranowski. This is still a Roger Corman feature. It's basically Slumber Party Massacre 4. Brinke Stevens comes back as, you guessed it, Linda Dawn Grant. All of these movies, except for Slumber Party Massacre 2 and 3, have a chick named Linda in it. Is Linda the most popular name? Crazy. This is... I don't like Cheerleader Massacre. Anyway, moving on. I don't even know about these movies. They're so confusing. It's like the Massacre franchise is like a 7 to 9 film franchise that you'd have to be the most deep cut level horror movie nerd to know that they're even related to each other. That's an existential crisis for another time. I would absolutely recommend watching Slumber Party Massacre 2. I mean, I guess watch 1 if you want to, but definitely watch 2 because it is such a fun movie, especially for the driller killer's performance. He did such a good job, and it's unfortunate that, you know, that storyline was not able to continue, particularly with that actor who was so impressive and really hadn't been and didn't go on to be in anything else. But, I mean, he's the son of a millionaire, so, like, what's he even need to do that for anyway? And I would totally recommend Sorority House Massacre. I thought it was a really great creative movie, particularly for the time that it came out in. As for the others, they exist. So I came up with a fun fanfic rewrite. Stick with me. Okay, first movie, we have Russ Thorn. He is not an escaped dude who's murdered a bunch of people. No. He's a cop. He's a bad cop. A perverse, psychotic cop. He's been abusing his family for years, and he murders them, except for Bobby and Beth, who survive. Then he also goes on to kill a bunch of chicks in the sorority house across the street, because, again, he's a perverse lunatic. Maybe he's been obsessed and stalking one for a while, and her getting a boyfriend set him off, and he made him deranged. He went on a murder spree, because men can't take rejection. Okay, so that's that film. He gets killed. Bobby, Beth, and some of those sorority chicks survive. Moving on to the second film. In this film, so Beth and Bobby have a psychic link. I don't know why. I just want it to be that way. So, now Bobby's gone crazy. He's lost it. He's taking his revenge out and anger on women because that's what men do. I don't know why. I just know that's what the math is. And it's a horrible tragedy that is real. Okay, so they have to stop Bobby. Cool. Alright, next film. Beth and Bobby still have a psychic link. He's still alive. He survives. He's in prison. Okay, they have a psychic link. She and some friends use a Ouija board because she a dumb bitch. And they accidentally resurrect the ghost of Russ Thorn, the uncle, and he possesses Bobby. And this time they do end up, unfortunately, having to kill Bobby and send the ghost of Russ Thorn back to the grave. Fourth film, Beth is just snapped. She's a killer now. And she's going to go and kill a fraternity. Because after all these films set in sororities, I just want one fucking horror movie set in a fraternity where a bunch of half-nude dudes run around getting killed by a chick. That's what Black Christmas 2019 should have done been. And honestly, Beth, good for you. I don't know what I'm doing. If you enjoyed this, why? If you actually do watch any of these movies or have seen any of these movies, let me know how you feel about them. I'm very curious. Have a good day. Have a good slumber party. And maybe we'll meet again one day.